think both our microphones are now working. I'm going to give this very do you want to turn off yours? Yeah. This very brief bio that I do not think even begins to cover everything that you brought here. Rabia Chaudry is an attorney, advocate, podcaster, and author of the New York Times bestseller Adnan Story, an executive producer of the 4-part HBO documentary The Case Against Adnan Syed, which is also based on her book. Chaudry is also a co-producer and co-host of 4 podcasts, an incredible amount: Undisclosed, The 45th, The Hidden Djinn, and the new Robbie and Ellen Solve the Case. She's also a wife, mother, an incredible cook, details of which can be found in her memoir, Fatty Fatty Boom Boom. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me. Salam. Hi, everybody. There's a lot of people.
This very brief bio does not even begin to cover everything that you do. How do you find the time to do 4 podcasts and be an attorney and write a book?
Well, the good news is I don't do it all at the same time. It's like, this is like a 20-year career, you know, like in the bio, but I've been lucky that I've always been able to do exactly what I want in my career. I started off as an attorney, I'm still an attorney, and it's just evolved into lots of different things and aspects of my advocacy work, so it's been really fulfilling.
And you're a fellow as well?
I'm a fellow of a lot of different things. I'm a fellow of the Shalom Hartman Institute. I'm a fellow, I do a lot of fellowships because they're incredible learning experiences, but right now I'm a fellow of the Aspen Institute. It's called the Civil Society Fellowship, and it's pretty extraordinary, yeah.
Great. I think we'll get out one thing out of the way immediately, and then we'll come back and talk about it. So you became to prominent attention in America with Serial, the podcast, in 2014.
Yeah.
Yes, based on the case of Adnan Syed, who was a childhood friend of yours, correct? Your brother.
Yes. I wonder how many people here have heard Serial? Okay. But how many have heard of Adnan Syed? Like, he's pretty much become a global figure, yeah.
Yes.
So I was in law school when Adnan was arrested, and I was in his trial. I was there the day he was convicted, and I knew everything had gone wrong. And so began 23 years of trying to prove his innocence and release him and do everything we could to tell his story, from the podcast to the book to the documentary. And, you know, alhamdulillah, September 19th of this past year, Adnan finally came home. So it was great.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I can't even imagine what that feeling must have been to have.
I mean, it was surreal. And the moment we walked out of when we walked out of the courthouse with him, it was like out of a movie, but it was exactly how I had visualized it all these years. I said, one day we're going to walk out, we'll be surrounded by cameras, he will be fully exonerated, and all these prayers I made for him for so many years, you know, they all came true that day.
I think that we'll probably logically talk more about this in a couple minutes, but
Nope.
I would really like to, let's talk about your memoir.
Okay.
So you chose to write this memoir, a memoir of food, fatness, and family, right? And there's so many different ways memoirs can go. Why did you settle on this as your approach?
So, you know, I mean, Adnan's story, like, it was really an interesting phenomenon because it suddenly brought, like, just millions of eyes, not just to the case, but also to me, to our community, to American Muslims and how we live and all these things. And so as soon as the first book came out, you know, it did really well. It was a bestseller. And my publisher was like, well, what's next? And I had never even thought about writing one book, much less a second book. And I said, I need some time. And I also thought, the first book, it took so much research to write because I had to make sure every legal fact was correct. I had to go through every single police file, tens of thousands of pages to make sure everything. I said, what can I write that I don't have to research? That'll be really easy. That's in my memory. And then when I decided on writing a memoir, it was like, I could write about my career. I could write about American Muslims in America after 9/11. There's so many things you can write about. And I decided to tell the story that I had never spoken about publicly or you know, on social media. I'd never written about. And that is like my lifelong struggle with weight. And you know, I'm 48 years old, I'll be 49. And I think the struggle, I finally gave up the struggle a few years ago, and I came to like kind of accept myself. But it took 4.5 decades of just torturing myself. And I know it's a story that would resonate with so many people, even though I write a lot about Pakistani culture and food because I love Pakistan. Obviously, I cook Pakistani food. But I know that every other person in America has the same story. Like, you know, it is a multi-billion-dollar industry, weight loss. And with social media, it's just made things worse for like body positivity and self-image. And it really has resonated with a lot of people.
Yes, one of the things that struck me is how relatable so many of the stories you tell, either your childhood. I mean, we might as well just talk about how you got the title of the book for those who haven't read it. Are so universal.
Yeah, Fatty Fatty Boom Boom was one of many nicknames I had as a child. My cousin who lives in Lahore, I was like maybe 11 years old and we were eating and suddenly he goes, you're Fatty Fatty Boom Boom. But I also was like Mota Aloo Pul Pula. I don't even remember, like, it's always, every nickname was attached to what my body looked like. And so that's where the title came from. And it was, I know he said it out of affection, but it stuck. He said it one time and it stuck with me for my whole life.
I was thinking about that because I've seen in other interviews where you said you're not a journaler, right? But yet,
I'm not what?
A journaler, somebody who
journals. Oh, right, I don't
yeah.
journal, yeah.
But yet there's so many concrete details in your memoir surrounding these moments of nicknames or body issues or eating that are so stark. And as someone who has also been bigger and smaller over the course of my life, I remember that those things stick. I don't need to journal them, right?
Yeah.
They stick.
Yeah, writing this book was like a journey of self-discovery for me. It was like reverse journaling, and I was able to connect a lot of dots. But one of the things that I really kind of shocked me was that I remembered how much I weighed at almost every point in my life. Like when I was 10, when I was 13, when I was 22. I knew exactly, like, down to the number, right? The pound, how much I weighed. Because it sticks with you, and because it is made such a big deal. Like your whole self-worth is about that number on the scale.
One of the things you mentioned, it's probably not something that many Pakistanis have had experience with, is in America the presidential fitness test.
Oh yeah. Is there something like that here? Anything?
I don't know.
In any of the schools, do you have a fitness test? No? Huh? I mean,
One would be the driving license. I mean, it's called a fitness test, but they just
visual. It's a visual test.
Yeah.
You don't have to run 1 mile.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's something in America for many years called the presidential fitness test. It's called something else now, but in 5th grade, they take all these 10-year-old kids who have never worked out in their lives and suddenly said, now you're going to have a test. And you're going to do pull-ups, you're going to run a mile, you're going to do crunches.
Yep.
It's a whole day of torture. And then either you get the certificate or you don't get the certificate. And it happens in front of everybody. And at the beginning, they weigh you in front of everybody. And they measure you. And it was, it's awful on so many levels. But at the end of that day, my younger sister, her name is Sidra, we call her Lily. She's always been very fit. She went home with a certificate and I did not. And my parents framed it and said, President Ronald Reagan has certified our daughter is fit. And I was like, this is not a real thing.
It's a weird, bizarre fixation on children's.
But also, it's like, these are not kids. You have not been training them.
No.
They're just kids who just got up out of class. Like, what do you expect, right?
Yeah.
Like, there was a rope.
There
with
was a rope,
knots
yes.
that
You
they
had to
want
try
you
and
to
climb the
climb.
rope. Yeah.
How?
And what I recall about it is that Arnold Schwarzenegger, right, was the person who was teamed up with President Reagan.
Oh,
for
is that
this.
right?
Yeah. So the biggest action star in the world was also judging you, your 10-year-old body, and about whether or not you could do X number of sit-ups, if I recall.
Yeah, and I think it only happened like once or twice in my entire, and then that was it. Everybody forgot about it.
Let's just keep talking more about this. So your book tour has largely been in America. You've been living in America
It's
for
been
most
all
of your
America,
life.
yeah.
And one of the things I also noticed again is that you have to explain out a lot of Pakistani culture. You don't go into great depth about it, but you do. There are bits and pieces that you need to explain to the readers who probably and largely American. What have you found that they have a difficult time understanding about your story?
I would say about 95% of my readership is like 35-year-old white ladies. I mean, really, that really is like maybe 30 to 45. Like that's the range. Mm-hmm. In my book tour, I had an 18-city book tour in America, and that's who showed up. And they said over and over, "This is not my story, but this is also my story." But one of the things I got, messages I got over and over again is like, in the American imagination, Pakistan is still that country that made the cover of Newsweek, like in 2007, as the most dangerous country in the world, with the scariest man on the cover. Yeah. And they do not understand Pakistan. It's like, is it Afghanistan? Is it like what is it? And one of the things I really wanted to do with this book was say, and I do this all the time with my American friends. I'm like, oh, you like Indian food? Let me give you something better. Come to my house. I love Indian food, but I was like, we do meat better. I mean, I was gonna be honest. So I feel like, you know, food is something that connects people very intimately, and it's such an easy, safe gateway drug into a culture. And I really wanted to distinguish Pakistani culture from Indian cuisine. And I wanted to elevate it, and I wanted this book to be an invitation to people to say, maybe this is a country worth checking out. Maybe these are people worth visiting, you know. I am convincing slowly, one by one, like a group of American friends to like come to Pakistan with me, maybe in the next year or so. So let's see how that goes. But in their minds, they still think it's going to be really dangerous, even though we live in a country where every day there's like 5 mass shootings, right? Like,
Yeah.
so.
I've been here a long time. My mom still thinks it's absolutely the most dangerous country in the
Yeah,
world. And I
yeah.
was like, I've been here for 10 years with no problem.
She should visit.
She's coming in May.
Oh,
for the
good, there you
first
go.
time, so. I wanted to get back to one of the things you say in the book that really stuck out to me is that many Americans think they might have had South Asian food because they've been to an Indian restaurant and they don't realize that there is this cultural difference in the
Yeah.
food. And that they'll go and maybe there'll be some, like a Pakistani dish on the menu and they'll get some Indian version. What did you say, palatized for the American palate? They don't get it.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, a phenomena I noticed a long time ago with restaurants, and you know, I was 6 months old when my family moved, 8 months old when my family moved to the United States. I was born in Lahore. And so I grew up in a time when there were no Pakistani restaurants. It was very hard to get halal meat and groceries. And now we're in a point where, you know, they're just everywhere, but there was this point at which, and now a Pakistani restaurant will proudly say we're a Pakistani restaurant, but there was a point where if it was a Pakistani restaurant, it would say Indian and Pakistani.
Yeah.
If it was a Bangladeshi restaurant, it would say Indian, Pakistani, and Bangladeshi cuisine.
Yeah.
Right? There's this totem pole.
Right.
And because people, again, didn't understand what does Pakistani mean. I remember once I was in high school and they're like, is that next to Vietnam? I'm like, no.
Wow.
Just look at a map, dude. So, yeah, I mean, like, I make very, and I actually put recipes. I put 10 of my favorite recipes in the back of the book.
Yes.
And, you know, I'm Punjabi, so pulao had to be there, pakode, Lahori fish, all these things. And I gave a list of, like, these are 20 ingredients. Just go to your local grocer and buy them, and I promise you can make everything. And it's so exciting because every so often, you know, some random person in the Midwest named Alice will be like, I made your dal makhani or whatever, you know, or your Lahori fish, and send me a picture, and it's like really gratifying.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm glad that people are actually, that's what I saw in the book, where a lot of people talked about the recipes, that they were so excited about the
Well, the
recipes.
truth is this, you know, when the Adnan Syed case was ongoing, and I'm so glad it's finally over, we did a documentary, right? And so the documentary aired in 2019. And what would happen is every time the film crew would come over, I would make chai for them because that's what Pakistanis do. So I wasn't making chai for the camera. I was making it for the videographer and the sound guy and the director. I was like chai, biscuit, samosa. And so they kept making footage of me making chai. And when the documentary aired and I was watching it along with the rest of the country and people were tweeting it, the most tweets I got was, what is your recipe for chai? Because in every scene I'm like making chai. And I was like, you want my recipe for chai? So I realized that I gave people the recipe for chai. It's in the book too. I tweeted it too. But I realized if I tweet a picture of anything I make, aloo parathe, anything, you know, I'm a home cook. I've been cooking for like 25 years. And I love home cooking. People are like, I need to know the recipes. So I had to put the recipes. And my editor fought me about this. And I said, I don't care, it's my book, we're doing it.
Was her fighting about memoirs don't typically have recipes in it, or just she didn't think anybody would?
She was like, well, look, is this a cookbook? Is it a memoir? Is it a weight loss book? I said no to all of that. But it's yes to all of it too. But it's not. I
Right.
said it's not a prescriptive book. It's not a how to lose weight book. It's just my story.
Right, these things are inexplicable. You have to eat every day, right? You have to
Yeah.
eat to stay alive.
Yeah.
You have to live in a body. These things are pretty much inextricable.
Yeah, it was interesting. So my editor was a woman who, she's not a foodie. She doesn't know how to cook. She's never had a weight issue in her life. So she really couldn't understand. She was like, you know, you talk about how miserable you are when you're heavy, when you were heavy, and then you talk about like this food you love. And I said, but everybody has to eat.
Yeah.
I said, and you know what? Everybody's entitled to enjoy their food. Even fat people are entitled to enjoy their food. So you are like just showing me the problem basically with your responses. Anyhow, we're still friends, my editor and I, but we had some tense moments.
Did you win her over some chai?
Did I what?
Did you win her over with some chai?
No, you know, she lives very far from me, and because she's not a foodie, I never invited her to my house for food yet. I will one day.
That's something so interesting about the memoir, which I think in America when we have memoirs, we talk about weight loss, or we talk about fat, or we talk about fat acceptance, right? There is this sort of punishing idea of food. And one of the things that you do so incredibly in the memoir is like the descriptions of the food are so loving, and they're so mouthwatering. Like I was reading your book the other day and like had to go out and get lunch. I was so hungry at the end, I like ran out and got lunch. And there's just this very interesting way that you're able to portray that you can love food and still have had a weight issue or still have had some issues with your body, and it doesn't mean that you have to hate the food, which is linked to your family, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, all of us, I mean, like, food is such an important part of any cultural tradition, but also family tradition from house to house, right? Like, so many of my family stories, and I'm sure everybody's stories, are around food. So many. And so there's no way to divorce it, but also, you almost have to be dead on the inside if you don't like food. I don't understand people who don't like food and who don't like food. I love, like, you know, food porn. I love reading food descriptions. And I wanted people to be like, I don't know what chaat masala is, but I have to get some. Right. I wanted to describe it that way. Chaat is a thing that Americans have no idea. No idea. They're like, what is a chaat? And I'm like, let me tell you in 6 pages what is whatever.
You even give recommendations on the brands of spices they should go
yeah.
out, right?
I was like, yep. I said, get the Shan or the National, whatever. They're not sponsoring me, unfortunately, but they can call me anytime, you know.
You also said there's a saying, the love in your hands, right? That goes.
Oh, the taste in your hands, like hot ka maza, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so my mom was also, you know, everybody's mother is a great cook, right? That's just how it is.
No.
Not?
My mom's not watching this, so I can say
Okay, it's okay. A lot of moms are good cooks. But yeah, no, there were, you know, certain things where my mom's family's from Delhi, so she's like, you know, she had her Delhi family recipes. And we grew up in a community where there weren't a lot of Pakistani families, but there were some, and a lot of them were from rural areas in Punjab. And my mom would say, you know, they would ask her, how do you make this dish from Delhi or this? And she would say, haath ka maza to hai. Again, they can't do it. They'll never get it.
Yeah.
And so my mom's like, you know, she's like, you inherited it, others inherited it in the family, and I kind of believe that in a way. So it's interesting. You give 5 people the same recipe, they're going to have different dishes at the end. This is how it is.
Yeah. The book comes out at a very unusual time for you, right? Unfortunately, your father becomes very ill. Adnan is released. Your book comes out all at the same time. And I think for many people, they assumed the memoir, right, was going to delve into, again, your relationship to this case. But really, there's very little about it in the book. When did you finish writing?
I finished writing the book 18 months, about almost 2 years ago.
Okay.
2 years ago, I turned in the book. And I very deliberately, look, I have given, I don't know, maybe 600 talks on Adnan and the legal system and criminal justice in America, right? And I said, okay, there's nothing more to say. I've said everything that can be said, basically, about actually, that's not true. I'm still working on the case because we have to find the killer of the victim, but that's a whole different story. But I said, you know, I want this very deliberately to be like the most personal, vulnerable memoir there is. I want to be honest, and I want to be, you know, it's interesting because in our culture, we are taught not to be honest, really, to really sugarcoat things, but also not let your skeletons out of the closet. And I let all kinds of skeletons out of the closet. And everywhere I went, people asked me, how did your family feel about this book? And I said, luckily, nobody in my family reads, so I could write anything I want. I had no idea, of course, when I was told that the published date would be, I don't even know what it was, October of 2022, that in September Adnan would come out, that in August my father would have the stroke that would eventually kill him. And everybody's introduced to Ammi and Abu in the book immediately. And the great thing is online, on social media, everybody calls him Abu. Everybody calls my dad Abu. How's Abu? Where's Abu? So people have gotten to know my family on social media. And then when he passed away in December, right after my book tour, it was just like condolences from across the world, people thinking about Abu. And so many have gotten to know the family through the book.
And we see a little bit of him in the documentary too.
You do see my dad in the documentary
Yeah, so-
from years ago when he was doing better, yeah.
I find it interesting you say that, you know, there's so much we don't talk about, but yet somebody said to you when you're on your way to come back to visit, they're going to call you fat. That's just the way it is, right? There's something along the line that when you go back to Lahore or you come back to Pakistan, they're just going to say it as it is. You shouldn't.
Oh,
you
yeah, I mean, so
shouldn't
this
tweak
was like, so I was previously married, and, you know, my ex-mother-in-law was really frank. And I remember after I got married, my ex-in-laws, they spent a lot of time, like, discussing my weight and being upset at my weight. And I was gonna come to Pakistan for the first time since the wedding, and I was gonna meet all their relatives here. And my mother-in-law said to me, listen, don't get offended. Americans are so thin-skinned. Hum ganje ko ganja kehte hain, mote ko mota kehte hain, right? Like, this is how it is. They're gonna call you mota, just take it. It's not an insult, it's just an observation. And I was like, okay. I mean, you know, people didn't really do that, but it is true though. That is kind of how we are. And I think a lot of it is not malicious. It actually is an observation. And with my family, it never felt malicious. With my ex-in-laws, it did feel malicious. And that's when I really started like hating myself and self-loathing and stuff. But, you know, one thing I'm really proud of in this book is that, you know, I read a lot of South Asian authors. Because why not? Of course, I'm going to be drawn to that, and South Asian fiction. And a lot of times I find characters who are like Pakistani or South Asian characters to be like these magical people. Like they're just like esoteric, and even people who are like completely not educated, they all have these really lofty ideas, and they're all philosophers. I mean, I have never met people like that. My uncles cuss and curse in words I didn't even understand, and I put them in the book. I'm like, this is how real people are in Pakistan, right? I want it to be very real. I was like, I don't want to create these magical characters I've never even, that in the white imagination and the American imagination, everybody over there is like this mystic, you know, whatever, philosopher. No, they're just people who cuss and fight and scream and get back together over some biryani.
You write this incredibly detailed description of a fight before your aunt's wedding.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I love because I wasn't in the middle of.
One mamu broke a chair over the other mamu's head right before my khala's wedding.
Yeah.
That's reality. That's
Right.
how our families are. Well, not everybody's, but my family.
Right, and there's all these incredible, you know, let's hop on the bike, you know, hopping on the back of the bike to going out and getting food and bringing them all back in.
Yeah,
And-
they're just middle class people.
Right, and I guess I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what you just said, which is that often when we write or we talk about South Asia or any culture that isn't American culture, right, it's always mystified. It's
Yeah.
always, and then the question becomes like, who are we writing these stories
Who are you
for?
writing it for? Yeah.
Right. And even with Pakistani authors, right, they're forced to, either through the editorial process or for like what's going to be accepted, to do this magical South Asian mystic jinn, you know, amalgam of something, right?
Yeah.
And you resist that.
Yeah.
I think
yeah.
very successfully.
I mean, because I can't lie about like what actually happened. I can't lie and make up characters in my family that don't exist. And I also think that they are so much richer for who they are. They're real people, and it was interesting when we were deciding on the cover of the book. I was not consulted, and I wasn't initially consulted, and the publisher, the editor, sent me a couple of versions of the cover and said, "We're so excited about these." And I looked at it, and it was the most like terrible cover, because the cover that they had was black, and then it had like these block rainbow colors that said "Fatty Fatty Boom Boom." I said, "There's nothing on this cover that reflects my culture, my stories, anything I've ever written about." I said the book is full of food. You could put a cup of chai. There's so many visual things you could put. They did a second version, and it came back with, I swear, lobsters and asparagus on the cover. I said, we don't eat either one of those things, and I have never mentioned them in the book. And I said, and then the editor said to me, or the publisher, they said, you know, listen, our audience is the white female book club.
Yeah.
I said, I don't care. It is my story. So they ditched it. They hired a Pakistani American book designer, and she designed this beautiful book, and the letters are all like in the embroidery, you know what I mean? Like, it's a very ethnic looking, and I said, thank you. It's a joyful book. It's a joyful cover.
The
but
colors and...
yeah, I said, I'm not, I actually said at one point to my agent, I said, give them back the deposit. I'm not publishing the book if they don't give me what I want.
It's not surprising, I guess, is really what I should say, that in some ways this is this difficult balance, right?
It's a hard balance. They need to sell a book.
Right, they need to sell a book.
Yeah.
But there's also something insulting about the idea that maybe these Midwestern white book clubs can't accept, but also forcing you into a mold that...
And they love it.
And they love it.
It has been, I mean, I have been invited over and over and over to those same book clubs, and I think it's just a relatable story, no matter your background. But people have sent me so many messages saying, we know nothing about your culture, your religion, the foods, and we're just blown away by all this. Yeah.
And I also think there's something interesting about you as a figure, right? As you mentioned, there's very little representation for Pakistani people in American culture, period. And you are a woman who wears a hijab, you're a lawyer, you do immigration work, you're getting involved in this legal case. So you yourself are someone that isn't presented in the public realm or in popular culture.
Yeah. You know, what was actually, so after 9/11, I had just graduated law school, and suddenly the American Muslim community was surrounded by police and surveillance and national security issues. So I began doing a lot of that work. And when Serial came out, the podcast came out, is because we had failed in all the appeals for Adnan, and I said, forget it, I give up on the courts, we're gonna go to media. And the journalist came to me after a year and said, we're gonna make a podcast. I said, I don't know what that is, but go ahead. And that podcast changed everything, because what happened was, you can hear me, you can hear my brother, you can hear all of us in this, you can hear Adnan, but you can't see us. Because you can't see us, you have no idea that I'm a woman who wears hijab, or that Adnan now is this Muslim with a big beard and a kufi. People have no, but they got to know us and like us as people without ever seeing us. And it kind of, I think if they had made a documentary where the visual was there first, it would have been different. So by the time that was over, they're like, I don't know who this woman is, but she's smart and funny and I want to follow her, whatever it is, right? It helped establish respect and trust for me and others in the story before people got to see us. And then when they finally got to see us in the documentary, a lot of people were like, oh, I didn't know that. And these are very Muslim-looking Muslims, right? But it really changed a lot of people's minds about who Muslims are and what we're like.
I found it very interesting that even through, so we of course, we're talking about 9/11. Adnan's arrested in 2000?
99.
99. So you have his arrest that comes before 9/11.
Yeah.
Then you're still pushing his case and pushing the legal issues through the Trump administration, right? Which of course was incredibly unkind to Muslims, all straights, but in particular Pakistan. He seemed to really be very focused on how much he disliked the amount of aid that comes to this country, that we were involved with Pakistan as well. And yet you didn't seem to lose people and their faith in this case and their interest in this case, and I found that, I mean, that's my outside. What was it like for you as...
I'll tell you something. There isn't this phenomena here in Pakistan, but there absolutely should be. True crime is a huge thing in America. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry. True crime podcasts, documentaries, books. People are obsessed with true crime. And I have never seen fans, if I go to a true crime convention, I can't move. I am mobbed because I'm this true crime queen now. And so the people who came to the story because of the case, they want the mystery, they want to solve the murder, they want to figure out the evidence. Those people stayed with me throughout every other thing I did. Whether it was this book, whether it was other podcasts. I made a podcast called The Hidden Jinn, which was a completely creative thing for me to do because I just love jinn stories and we all grew up with them. And there are now references to jinn in American pop culture here and there, but people still don't understand. Yeah. So it was so gratifying. I did a 10-part series that was scripted, and I researched it, and I linked all of the Muslim jinn lore to Christian and Jewish jinn lore, and then we had guests on like Shoaib, who's here, to tell us about his family jinn stories. And so that was all those people who are following me for true crime are now like, oh my God, what is all this jinn stuff? So it's I've managed to take this audience on quite a journey.
There is in my experience, quite an overlap between the true crime crowd and the supernatural crowd.
Sure.
They are a Venn diagram that is very
there is
close
definitely,
to being solid.
Yeah, I'm right in the middle of that Venn diagram.
Let's talk a little bit about why true crime isn't as popular here. I mean, Robbie is maybe a little bit underselling this. True crime is the thing in the United States,
It's
and in
huge.
particular is the thing for women.
Yeah.
Like the majority of the people who consume this, produce it, make stories about it,
Are women.
Are women.
Are women, yeah. It's, I mean, true crime audiences are like about 80% women. It's a very specific demographic, and I personally think the only reason true crime is not a thing in Pakistan is because it's just a barrier that hasn't been broken, but I would love to break that. I think it's time that like there were some movies and dramas made around true crime. I mean, like, I sit in America and I watch Indian true crime documentaries and films. This is happening just like right across the border. So if there's an audience there, there has to be an audience here.
Right.
I don't know why it hasn't gotten there yet, but I know there are people in this country who love mysteries, who read Agatha Christie, who love Sherlock Holmes, who I'm sure there's Urdu language literature with mysteries in it. It just, I don't know why it hasn't quite made it into that next phase.
Yeah.
But it's a huge industry.
Right. It's not just that they're making it; we can consume them here, right?
Yeah.
We get them through Netflix. We get them through Star TV or whatever else you're streaming.
Yeah, I mean, I don't just make true crime content. I consume it constantly.
Yes.
Like I'm always watching documentaries. That's how I relax. I watch a murder on Netflix. Like what
Netflix
happens?
Murders and Chill. Yeah.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought
That's
there
okay.
a little bit.
That's okay.
What have you been watching in terms of true crime? What have you been paying attention to?
So there's a case that's kind of unfolding in front of our eyes called this family, the Murdoch family in Georgia, and it is like generations of corruption and one family linked to like 5 mysterious deaths, probably all murders, and the father is on trial right now, and he likely killed his own son and wife. It is a crazy case, and I in my professional work have worked on 24 cases, like murder cases, and 13 of our defendants we've brought home. Like Adnan is the 13th of the innocent defendants that we've brought home. And in so many of these cases, you find the same thing. You find all this generational corruption with the lawyers and the police, and they're all working together. So I do watch a lot of documentaries about innocence cases because it's important to me, but also there's always a murder mystery. If this person in jail didn't do it, who did it, right? Like you want to do that. And now we have like such advanced techniques scientifically, like touch DNA is a thing. If I touch something 50 years ago, you can lift the DNA. So we're having record number of exonerations in America. Hundreds of people are being released from prison after 30, 40 years because they were innocent of a crime. So that's kind of like, that's like the bread and butter from, like, that's what I love the most.
Right.
Yeah.
And your news podcast, right, of course, is called Rabia and Ellen Solve.
The newest podcast
Yes.
is Rabia and Ellen Solve the Case, and it's a very different show. I have a co-host named Ellen Marsh. She's a comedian and Broadway actor, so I'm like the serious one. She's the funny one, but we take a look at historical cases, like we just did the murder, the assassination of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, and we try to show our audience like most of what you know is like what you just consume through the media without any critical analysis.
Right.
There's so much more to the stories behind it, and it's been great.
Yeah, I listened to one of the West Memphis
The West
3,
Memphis 3, yeah.
which we are about the same age. That was a very hot case
Big
when
case.
we were growing up.
Big case.
Um,
And I'm friends with Damien, and
Yeah.
I'm friends, and they're still trying to get the killer in that case.
Yeah, which is just absolutely a heartbreaking case. If you
3
are
little
interested
boys
in
were
true
murdered.
crime, this is a case worth looking up.
Yeah.
These poor children who've
Yeah.
never seen justice. But is there any particular like flavor of true crime that you're drawn to? I mean, is it just places like murders, or is there other?
No, I mean, I like investigate. I'm an
I
investigator.
feel weird saying that. Is it just murders?
Is
that
it
you
just, it's all murder, first of all. But no, the human psyche, I don't know if anybody's seen, there's a Netflix documentary about this entire family that was found dead in India. And I cannot remember the name of the
The
documentary.
Delhi crime?
No,
Oh,
this
the
entire
other
family
one.
was found hanging in
Yes,
their home.
the other one.
And it was a terrifying, terrifying documentary. And at the heart of things like that, it's like, the reason I want to watch it is I want to try to understand like what is motivating people, what is happening inside of psyches, even cults form like that. How do people agree for an entire family to commit suicide together? So it's really trying to understand the human condition. And to be honest, I have a theory that every great story ever told from the Quran and the Bible and Shakespeare has crime at the center of it, right? I mean, from the first murder
Right.
to, I mean, like the crime, we are all compelled by crime. I don't know why, but I think it's because we are curious about the dark aspects of ourselves.
Yeah. This is going to be a weird segue, but I'm going to go
Okay.
with that. What about, getting back to your involvement with Serial and Adnan, why do you think Americans were able to latch on to him?
To Adnan?
Yeah. And to you as well. I mean, there's the podcast aspect of it, but as
Yeah.
a sympathetic figure, Muslim men, let's be frank, are not often presented as the sympathetic figure.
Yeah, I learned a really hard lesson with Serial because, you know, after 9/11, I was one of many, many hundreds, if not thousands, of American Muslims who were trying to make things safe for Muslims in America. You know, we were doing all this civil rights advocacy, doing media advocacy, saying Islam is a religion of peace. No, this is what the Quran says. These are the facts and figures. These are who the terrorists are. I worked in national security policy for 6 years. We were trying so desperately to make America accept us. But every year, Donald Trump was not a surprise. Every year since 9/11, the sentiment against Muslims kept growing and growing, and we couldn't understand what we were doing wrong. And what we were doing wrong was that we were telling people facts and not stories.
Yeah.
And what Serial did was just tell a human story. And I'll tell you, you know, in this case, Adnan was in high school when he was arrested. He was 17. He had been dating this girl for 6-7 months, and then she was murdered. And when Serial came out, there were so many people in the Muslim community and Pakistani community who came to me and said, "Why would you let them tell the story of him dating? Like, that's such a shame for us." I said that he's been in prison for 20 years. That's not a shame for you. I said, you don't even know what your kids are doing if you think that's the problem here. So, like, our community is so afraid of telling human stories. We're afraid of telling stories where people have addiction problems. There's abuse. There's domestic violence. We want to hide it and hide it and hide it. But it wasn't until we were able to do that, then you can't connect to other human beings. That was the hard lesson for me. It was a great lesson to learn. And that's why people resonated. It was a great story.
Yeah.
It was a great story.
I remember at some point in the documentary during his phone calls where I think he said something like, I would have been getting high at this time. And I was like, oh boy, he said that on tape? Right?
It was not easy for Adnan to admit publicly that he was smoking marijuana as a kid because he knows it's going to shame his family.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I said, Adnan, it's this or you die in prison,
Yeah.
right? That's your choice.
And his story goes on, right? I think this big tweet where he's standing in front of his parents' refrigerator and asking what something is when he comes out.
That was in September. That was the day we brought him home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The story goes on, right? And the humanity connects and people.
His parents did not disown him because he was smoking marijuana at 17. It was interesting because one reaction we got a lot from American audiences was like, oh my gosh, he was living a double life. I said, every Pakistani kid in America is living a double or triple life. I'm like, but also every teenager.
Every teenager.
Kind
that
of
is such a teenager thing.
Right, like, there's no kid who doesn't hide something from their parents, right? Like, that's just normal human behavior. So it was like we had to kind of deal with all of that and say, that's crazy to
I
think.
will assure anyone who is not an American teenager in American high school, we also did not tell our parents if we were going off to smoke weed. We said we went to the library. And there's something about this storytelling, there's something about this connection that forms between people.
You know, look, what I learned is like, I'm an advocate at the core of my work. You cannot have good advocacy without good storytelling.
Right.
I literally, after Serial, took workshops on storytelling. I learned how to tell stories. At the end of the day, I don't care if it's the courtroom or the media, the best story wins, always.
Right.
Yeah.
Stories and food, right? To circle
That
it back
helps
around.
too.
What connects us as human beings?
Yeah.
Stories,
Yeah.
food, and family.
Yeah.
Is there? We're gonna definitely have some time to open it up for questions. I had a couple of ringer questions I wanted to get out.
A couple of
before.
what?
Ringer
Oh,
questions.
yeah, okay. All right.
So my questions for you or surrounding food was: when you get off the plane and you come back to Pakistan, what is the first meal you have?
Well, the first meal I want to have, or
The first meal you want to have, not the one your family gives you.
To be honest, and I still haven't had it. I landed in Lahore a week ago. I was there for like 3 or 4 days, and then we came to Karachi. We're going back to Lahore. I will not leave this country until I have bhaiya ke kebab from Model Town in Lahore. Like, it's like ek bachpan ki yaad hai, you know what I mean? I don't even know if they taste good. I just remember that, and sarda ki machi, like that's like a fried, it's like fried fish. And so these two things I keep, and we've been so busy, and I'm like telling my husband, and my husband is visiting Lahore for the first time in his life. He really had only been to Pakistan once before when he was like 16 for a few days. So in his imagination, Pakistan is also like a country in ruins. He cannot, he's like a kid in a candy store. He cannot believe the development in the country. He's so excited by the country. He's Canadian. And so yeah, but we're not leaving until we have those two dishes.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you can't get in the U.S.? Even in production?
Anything I can't get in the U.S. Listen, everybody sells biryani, but nobody sells a good pulao. I don't know what's wrong with people. Yeah, I'm a pulao kind of person.
I will admit, I prefer pulao over.
You prefer? Thank you.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. But look, I'm a Punjabi. What is it?
No one
I'm in
tell
the
my
wrong
boss
place.
so I don't get
I'm
fired
so
from my
sorry.
job.
It's blasphemous here. I know.
What do you serve Americans who've never had Pakistani food?
Oh, when I have, I always make a yakhni pulao. So like, you know, I always serve goat because people are like, goat? We do not eat goats.
We do not eat goat in the U.S.
But they love goat when they have it. So I always do some kind of goat curry, you know, I always make kebabs. I make the things that are, you know, nihari, halim, the things you'll never find in an Indian restaurant.
Right.
You just won't find those. Yeah.
And generally, what's the reaction when you serve your American friends Pakistani
Oh, they're like,
food?
you're right. This is better than Indian. It's different. I'm not going to say it's better. This is different. Yeah.
With that, I think it's about time for us to open up
No
to
idea.
questions. And apparently, we already have one right here in the front row.
Do you have a time check?
Do you know what time it is? We have 15 minutes.
So many things I want to say,
Okay.
but I'm not going to say them.
Say them
because okay, just one random thing I'm going to throw out is that my mother is a true crime maniac. Like and I'm trying to get her off it now because that's all
don't
she
do that
watches.
to her.
Every evening she's saying, like, so bad what happened to such and such family in Midwest, you know, in America, etc. Anyway, moving on to my question. So,
I know that audience exists here. I believe it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I see that, you know, I haven't read the book yet, but whatever we've seen you discussing about your journey so far, right? Between the family calling you out for, you know, your weight, then the ex-in-laws, right? And many other things that happened along the way. You moving to America, you having to post 9/11, explain to people that no, you are not dangerous because you're Muslim and Muslims are not dangerous per se. I see like a struggle to be understood from, you know, really since childhood, right? And I'd love to know that along this journey, where or with whom have you actually wound up feeling safest and where have you felt most understood? Because I feel like you had a family and now you have a community around the world, right?
Yeah.
Because of your work.
Yeah.
So I'd love to just hear that from you.
You know, I wish my family did read. The only person who would have read my book was my father, and he passed away. Because I'll say this, that, you know, if you have not ever had a weight struggle, you're not going to understand that nobody works harder to lose weight than heavy people. There's nothing we haven't done. We have starved ourselves. We have done everything. But at the end of the day, the people who are close to you are going to say, this is just a lack of self-control.
Yeah.
This is like a personal character flaw, like that you don't have the discipline to just lose 25 pounds, how hard, whatever. There's no understanding of like metabolic issues. America has horrible food. It's all processed. And my parents gained a tremendous amount of weight when they went to America because they stopped eating ghar ki roti and they're eating the white bread, right? And I think you're seeing across the world the same phenomena as all this junk food is being, but that's like the staple of our diet. And so there's no understanding of what that's done to our metabolism. It's just you have a discipline issue. So I felt the safest when I met my second husband, who is also my current husband. I don't know where he is. He's here somewhere. But he's with our son. Because when we were friends first, and we connected over the fact that we both had always been very heavy, and we were trying to lose weight. And so we've been married 17 years, and in those 17 years, I have been at my heaviest and at my lowest, and never once has he ever said, you're not beautiful and you're not, like, you know, and we're both in the same struggle constantly. And so I have always felt safest with him.
keep this short. This is a comment and a question. If you remember the Hulu series, Only Murders in the Building.
Which series?
Only Murders in the
Oh
Building.
God, yeah, I love that. Yeah.
That mocked true crime.
It did, yeah.
There was that, and I was wondering if you had seen that. And the real question is, I mean, you've got all those links to true crime and you've worked on it extensively. Why not produce something for the Pakistani market?
Oh, well, okay, I have seen Only Murders in the Building, and they do make fun of all the true crime tropes, and it's all true. And they're making fun of people like me, but it's true, and it's okay. It's okay to poke fun of something. And I love this show, so I have seen it, and the tropes are like, every victim, lit up the room when and a lot of victims were horrible people. Nobody cared about them. But these kind of tropes happen over and over. I would love to. I've actually talked to a couple Pakistani writers, and I said, can we write a Pakistani murder mystery? Can we do the film with a whodunit, 15 people on an island, and one by one they get killed. You don't know who. I would love to do that with the top. I would love it. I just, I don't know the people, right? I don't have but I have the stories, and I have consumed enough. I would love to do it, but I don't know enough people. Yeah, I don't know the right people. We're gonna talk? Okay. A Pakistani Clue. Have you seen Clue? Oh, it's the best.
Oh, Pakistani Clue would be amazing.
Wouldn't it be
It'd
amazing?
be incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, it'd be like Rubina auntie in the kitchen with a slipper. She's the killer.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
It's Chapel.
Yeah.
I think we have a question over here.
Hello.
Hi.
Just one question. You mentioned that when you weren't able to find justice in the courts with Adnan's case, you went to the media. Yeah. So can you just give a brief summary of how did you engage the media, or how did you get them interested in actually going through with you?
It was nothing short of a miracle, to be honest. I was watching a documentary, actually on the West Memphis case one night, and I had seen 5 documentaries about this case, same case, over the years. I kept watching, and every time I watched a documentary, my mind would change. Oh no, this person did it, this. And I realized how powerful the media is. So I turned it off. I turned off turned off Netflix. It's 11 o'clock at night, and I just Googled. I Googled Adnan Syed, 1999 Baltimore, to see, is there any journalist who wrote about this story in 1999? And I found this woman named Sarah Koenig. And I said, what is she doing now? Oh, she's producing radio. I'm just going to send her an email. It was a Thursday night. The next morning, she emails me and said, I'd love to come meet you. A week later, she's at my house, and when you listen to Serial, that's in the first episode. It happened like that. But I really believe it was meant to be. The woman who directed that documentary I watched that night ended up 7 years later directing our documentary. So it was miraculous. But it is not easy to get media interested. But now, since Serial, there's a big boom. A lot of journalists want those cases. They want the stories. They know there's a lot of readers and audience, so it's easier now. But we just got very lucky. Yeah.
That journey of watching the Paradise Lost documentaries is insane in terms of changing your mind about who is responsible for those murders. Yeah. Do we have?
Oh, there's one.
Hi. So just to I'll just give a little introduction about myself, followed by the questions. So I'm a lawyer as well, and I have my own law firm, so I'm one of the few women who have their own law firm at this age in Pakistan, in Karachi, and I also have a social impact venture in arts, music, culture, education. So my question firstly is about home and identity and belonging, because I've been in America my whole life since I was born. And people ask me, when did you get to America? And it just kind of feels alienating because I was born in America. So that is kind of difficult to navigate, especially after 9/11 and all of that. And when I'm here, I miss there, and when I'm there, I miss here. So that's always going to be a thing. So what have you found helpful in navigating that? And that's kind of personal and universal. And the second question is about being a writer. How do you find those people to, grow with as a writer? What has been helpful in your journey?
I love that first question about identity. And, it's interesting. My father really shaped how I felt about America growing up. And my father was a veterinarian, and he was the head doctor at the Lahore Zoo. And when went to America, he did everything immigrants do. He was a security guard. He was, they did all those little jobs until he could get his qualification to practice there. But he always said over and over, that like, this is your country. You have to take ownership of this country. Like, nobody's gonna hand it to you, take ownership of it. And there was a brief, and I think it happens around college age. A lot of people go through an identity crisis. By the time you hit 35, I don't know how old you are, 35, you're like, it's not such, it doesn't plague you as much.
Yeah.
And it used to be that I would think, am I this or this? Until I got to the point where I said, I am all of it.
Right.
And I want all of it. I'm gonna be as American as I can, and I still, I one time said in a speech, I said, Pakistan is the mother that birthed me and America is the father that raised me. And that's how I feel. I have tremendous love and respect for both nations, while being fully aware of all the problems and social issues in both of them.
Right.
But that exists in every society. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the main thing is like when you have a certain identity and random strangers are kind of telling you that's not your identity, like you're not American enough or you're not Pakistani enough, and you're just kind of like, how do you respond to that? Do I need to respond to that? And it just kind of gets in your
nobody
head.
gets to tell me who I am.
Exactly.
It could be honestly, look,
It gets exhausting, and you're like, I'm 36, so I've
Yeah.
kind of like had there half my life,
Yeah.
lived here, so I'm like,
I don't engage that. I get trolled a lot online. People will say to me, you're this. There are Muslims who say, this is not hijab, sister. You get it from all sides, right?
yeah.
And I have to live my life. Like, nobody gets to decide how I feel about my identity and what it is. I decide that. And so maybe I have a really thick skin,
Yeah.
but it just kind of bounces right off of me. I'm like, the issue you are coming to me with is actually your problem. It's your insecurity. It's whatever, your prejudice, your projection, it's not my problem.
Yeah.
So, it literally just, one ear and out the other. I don't think about it at all. And, I have 3 kids. My eldest is 25, 14, and almost 6. So I have been raising kids for a very long time. And for all of them, I want them to embrace the best of both worlds, and feel proud of their identity and not feel like I don't fit in America or I don't fit here. No, you fit everywhere. It's okay. And we live in a very different world now. We live in a very international world, right? There's a lot of in America, nobody has a hometown anymore. People are just transient. But the second question, the writing process. I'm actually a very solitary writer. I know there are a lot of writers that have community of writers. I don't know how to do that. And I don't write. I don't sit down to write until it's written here. So as I'm making my aloo ke parathe or washing the dishes, I'm writing in my head. I'm like, in this chapter is going to be this, and this, and this. So that when I sit down, I can knock it out very quickly. And that's just been my process. And I think it's because I've always had to be a mother my entire career. I was 22 when I had my eldest. I was still in law school. I never really had the luxury of doing a writer's retreat or doing, you know what I mean? I just got to get it done. So that's been my process.
So you don't have friends or people who kind of are around, you write by yourself, but you kind of seek feedback or some review or...
No, I have great writer friends, but I've never ever sent them anything I've written. And I've done, look, when you're a lawyer, you write a lot anyways.
Yeah.
I have written hundreds of essays and blogs, and I've never really, even getting feedback from my editor is a little uncomfortable. I'm like, I like it the way it is. Yeah, sorry.
You do mention somewhere, I think, maybe it was an interview I saw with you, that you're talking about the clarity of your writing, right? That in law and in storytelling, you need to have which this book is incredibly clear and very, accessible.
Yeah, what I learned is I used to be the kind of lawyer that when I wrote legal briefs, it was or when I wrote anything, I would use all that legal language, respondent, appellee, this and that. And then I realized a human being is going to read this, and it's going to be much more effective if I say my client's name, if I humanize the story that they're going through. And again, this actually also I learned after Serial. I was like, I have to make and I think it makes all the difference. When you remove jargon, people can understand things better, and it touches them. It really does touch them.
Do we have other questions?
There's two more.
1, 2. I guess whoever gets the microphone first.
Hi. I just wanted to point you towards a podcast that you may not have encountered. It's called Notes on a Scandal. And it's a
I have heard of it.
true crime podcast by 2 Pakistani journalists
Okay.
on the Mustafa Zaidi case.
I have heard of it.
You really
Didn't it just
should.
come out this past year?
Yeah, just about a year, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So
okay.
there's 2 seasons, and you might find that really interesting. Talking also, then moving on and just talking about identity, I think that one of the problems we have as women or as people who traverse different cultures, because I'm a British Pakistani but born here, lived for 20 years in the UK, is that we're constantly searching for that elusive sort of place called home. And, you know, you can read about it, you can feel about it, you can travel all over the place. But I think we need to, in this day and age, redefine what home itself
I agree.
is.
Yeah.
And this whole ancient concept of one home, I think, is now outdated.
And I think that's what people struggle with.
Yeah. So, you know, there were things when I was living in the UK that I could identify with, which to me were very important, like, you know, the right to protest, the right to free speech, which we've struggled with so much in Pakistan, right? And there were things about Pakistan that I love, but it doesn't have to be an either or. This is about you, and even your identity, what you built it up to be today, can change tomorrow because you're constantly adding to it. You know, you'll move to different places. It's not even physical spaces anymore. You know, you could be
Virtual spaces.
they're virtual spaces, and I could, you know, so you connect with your audience in virtual spaces. So I mean, it's less a question that we have to stop doing this. We have to stop saying I am so and so, and I am this, and I am Pakistani, and you just are who you are, and you probably bring a lot more to the table. You can contribute from your experience of what you did in America or wherever else that you've been, and can probably contribute more towards a modern progressive Pakistan. So, you know, don't get caught up in this struggle of identity. You know, as Stuart Hall will tell you, it's gone.
Yeah.
Just be who you are, and you don't need to give yourself a name. That's all.
I think sometimes we feel like compelled to fit into some box, and you just kind of don't. It's liberating to just decide I don't need to. But I remember actively actually making a conscious, a thought formed in my head years ago where I said, everywhere I am is home. It's as simple as that. Yeah, anywhere I am is home.
Thank you.
I think there was
We have time for the one
last
more
question.
I just want to add that people kind of are like, where are you from? No, where are you from? I'm like, I'm from everywhere. So pretty much, yeah.
And a lot of people are nowadays. That's kind of how it is. It's a new it's the phenomenon nowadays. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum, Rabia. This is Nagin. I'm the one who's been messaging you on Instagram and Twitter.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Likewise.
Part of my virtual community.
Yes. I just wanted to ask you, as you mentioned earlier, that the podcast, serial podcast, took off because they listened to it with an open mind because they hadn't seen you and Adnan physically. I just wanted to ask you, after having, your images splashed all over the world in the US and everywhere else, do you think there's an added pressure now on you and maybe the Pakistani, for you and Adnan to sort of go out of the way and make a positive or form of positive image about the Pakistani and Muslim community?
If you follow me on social media, you know that it's very organic. Like, people just get to see my life. And, I made Umrah a week ago.
Yes.
And
Umrah
I did
Mubarak.
Thank you. And I was like, I know all these tens of thousands of people follow me. I'm literally going to Instagram live as I try to touch the Kaaba Sharif. And I made an Instagram live all the way there. And because I just want to invite people into our world. And it's not because it's contrived or I'm trying to make an impression. I'm like, that's my reality. That's what I'm doing. When it's Ramadan, we're fasting. I'm like, oh, look, this is what we're doing. And I'm not like doing active dawah. I'm like, this is just my life. But also, I'm tweeting about cats and, whatever, and politics and because we are multidimensional human beings. So I don't really feel the pressure. Adnan has only been out for a few months. We'll see how things go.
I think there would be a great Netflix series on like him exploring everything for the first time.
I'm trying to convince him.
I
But
think
yeah,
I'd rather see a Netflix
yes,
series about
yes.
Rabia.
That's true.
But I think we would rather keep some things to, the experiences to ourselves,
Yeah.
and not everything is for
Yeah.
media consumption.
Look, Adnan came home in time. His parents are very sick and old, that he got to see them. He was there when my dad died. He gave my father ghusl. He helped bear. Alhamdulillah, he came home at a time at the right time. He was there for all the things we needed him for. Yeah. Well, thank you guys.
I'm
Thank
sorry.
you so much.
Yes,
I know we're out of
thank
time.
you. Yeah, we are out of time. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rabia, so much for coming and talking to us.